everyone, starting from this video, we're going to learn chapter 9, hypothesis testing. And this chapter is built upon what I already know about the z-test, t-test. We went further to look at, hey, if I have an idea, how can I build out the system so that I can test out if my idea is correct or not. So actually, sometimes students get hesitate learning this chapter because they worry about math. But actually, the most difficult part in this chapter actually is form the correct hypothesis. So you need to know when to put in HO and when to put in H alternative. And then once you know that, and the rest of the thing will be, hey, to follow the book to do the right things. So therefore, in this chapter, we're going to look at, first of all, how you are able to know which one going to be your H alternative, how to set out your hypothesis, and then second, recognize two different kind of errors. And then third is we're going to dive into the specific hypothesis testing about, hey, how about I test the mean if I don't know the standard deviation? So that is the method we're using, the t-stats that allow us to do the hypothesis testing. Okay, so hopefully this short introduction give you an overview about what we're going to cover. So we are looking at the hypothesis testing. Any business want to take action, they always involve some kind of hypothesis, and they collect data to test it before they launch nationwide. Okay, so let's look at our learning objective very quickly. So we will try to achieve the following 5 learning objectives. So we will not cover the whole textbook chapter. The main reason is we are building a baby step for the last part of learning the regression model. And so in the regression model, we're also going to look at some kind of hypothesis testing. But before we move on that, we want to make sure the student are build a good foundation to understand what is hypothesis testing. So therefore, the first, we're going to get familiar with the steps to form for the hypothesis testing. Especially, we spent a lot of time to define HO and H alternative because that actually ended the difficult part facing a lot of business decision makers is to understand, hey, how can I set out my hypothesis? And number 2, we're going to try to achieve is to understand type 1 error, type 2 error, and power. So this part of learning is not only important for our class, QB1, QBA 2 or QBA 3 down the road, but also it's very important for any of you guys want to walk into the data science field. So in the data science, there is some metric to measure the precisions, and then that's when you actually really need to fully understand what is type 1 error, type 2 error, in order to understand the further metric that measure the quality of the machine learning model. Okay, so again, type 1, type 2 error is very confusing for a lot of people, so therefore make sure spend a lot of time when you watch that part of the lectures. And then we're going to look at the decision rule, critical value, and rejection region. And from there, we're going to focus on one specific case. It is when we don't know the standard deviation, sigma, and then we are trying to do the hypothesis testing of the mean. And so in that scenario, we can use the t statistic. If you don't remember why we use t versus z, you should revisit the last week's module. Okay. And after that, we're going to look at, hey, besides use the critical value, can we use a p-value to do the hypothesis testing? So the answer is yes. So for the hypothesis testing, we always had 2 approach, either use the critical value or use the p-value. And so in a lot of business world, we really just focus on the p-value. Since we are building a foundation, we're also going to look at the critical value. So therefore, you need to pay attention on the relationship between using a critical value approach versus the p-value approach, because you're going to see some tests related to the critical value versus the p-value. You need to know how to calculate the t statistic, finding the t critical value, and based on that to make a decision, etc. Okay, so that is the introduction for this chapter of the learning. Hope you feel excited because this part is really highly relevant with the business decision people usually make. Okay, so after this video, next we're going to kick off the steps in testing the hypothesis and also some example help you to get familiar with the HO and H alternative.